You know, it turned out that growing up was a lot trickier than Ozzie and Harriet had led us to believe. You see, we were growing up in Midwest City, Oklahoma, tucked up next to Tinker Air Force Base, and these were the atomic times. I mean, even our schools were the rockets and the bombers and the jets, but none of us were worried or, well, even real surprised whenever the school bell rang weird. We just grinned. See, usually it rang one long, ordinary ring for recess, but this was a bunch of short ones, and it wasn't a fire drill, okay? Psst. I looked at Bobby, and Bobby looked at me, and psst. Lyndon looked back at Bobby and me, and psst. Stan looked all around, and we grinned. I mean, we knew what was going on. We had played this game before. And Miss Sims said, "It's time." And we all scrambled up out of our seats and filed out into the hallway at West Side Elementary to rehearse our salvation. We were so excited. We could have leaped tall buildings at a single bound. We could have flashed through Central City in a split second. But we walked slow and in line like we'd been taught, so no one would get trampled in the panic, you understand. Out in the hall, we stared at the brick wall, and I looked at Lyndon out of the corner of my eye. And Miss Sims said, "This is serious now. All together." Simon says, "Kneel." Very good, Lenny. Simon says, "Head on knees." That's right, Stanley. Simon says, "Hands overhead." Simon says, "Stay." This could save you, right? I mean, this could save you from both Oklahoma tornadoes and Russian atom bombs. Because if a tornado came crashing through, tearing up trees and trailer parks, or if the Russians flew over in one of their Badger bombers and dropped an A-bomb on the air base about a half-mile down the road, then this was the safest position for you to be in. All our dads worked out at the air base. A lot of our moms did too. And so I grew up under the flight path of those B-52 Stratofortress, or that F-100 Super Sabre. Those planes came in so low that their shadows dashed through our yards and cut through our baseball games. I once tagged out the shadow of an F-100 sliding into second base. Pow! We were used to all that. And in third grade, we knew every statistic. Mickey Mantle, switch-hitting outfielder for New York, batting .353 with 52 home runs and 127 RBIs. F-100 single-seat swept-wing fighter powered by Pratt & Whitney turbojet, cruising speed 417 miles an hour, armed with 4 20-millimeter cannons and Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. We knew them all. My dog, Noble Guy Henegar, he was a beagle. Noble Guy, he would chase those shadows for a split second as they dashed across the yard and in toward the air base down the road. And in fact, the first time that death passed low over our heads, its shadow slipped through the chain-link fence, dashed across the yard, flickered up and over the garage, just like always. But it took us a split second to make that identification. First, because we were playing baseball, of course, and my team was 1 run behind, so I was a little worried about that. And second, death looked pretty much like all the other planes that would pass over the house every day. The ones that would first begin to fall out of the sky out over Texas and race over the red dirt fields and the rolling hills of Oklahoma, flash over the house and West Side Elementary, and then in over downtown Midwest City with the Rexall drugstore here and the TG&Y 5 and Dime here. Langston's department store was there. And then in over the SkyTrain Theater. Is that a great name? SkyTrain Theater. None of us knew what it meant. And then finally in low, over that big sign out on the highway in between the base and the town, sign that said Midwest City, America's Model City. A noble guy, he chased that shadow. And when death flew over, well, my team was 1 run behind. I wasn't too worried because we had a guy on base, me. But my brother Bob was at bat. And my brother Bob, he was a pretty good batter for a first grader, but sometimes he got excited. And when he got excited, he wiggled. I mean, you've seen that, right? You can't bat and wiggle at the same time. Right? Mickey Mantle didn't wiggle. Willie Mays didn't wiggle. I explained this. Sometimes it helped and sometimes it didn't. But right then, Stan was pitching, so he did the announcing because we all did our own announcing. And Stan said, "Stan, the rubber-armed man, steps on the mound. And Stan, the rubber-armed man, checks the runners. And Stan, the rubber-armed man, takes the signal. And the crowd gets quiet." And Bobby yelled, "A lot of them have gone home already." Now, if you could still hear each other when you were outside playing like that, I mean, it probably was one of those fighters going over, like the F-100 I said, or maybe a T-37 fighter trainer. But if you couldn't hear well enough to argue whether that last pitch was a ball or a strike and your chest vibrated, it was probably a B-52 Stratofortress long-range bomber. Okay. Complement 6, including pilot, co-pilot, ECM, navigator, bombardier, and gunner, powered by 8, count 'em, 8 Pratt & Whitney turbojets, cruising speed 500 miles an hour, cruising range Russia, armed with your conventional but probably atomic bombs, Hound Dog air-to-surface missiles, and 4 50 caliber rear turret machine guns with lock-on radar fire control. I can still do it. But as it happened, Stan could hear just fine, and he said, "Stan, the rubber-armed man, the crowd's favorite pitcher, watches the first baseman would be quiet. Stan, the rubber-armed man, rocks back, and he throws." Now, home was this bare spot in the clover right behind the house. First base was the corner of the garage. Second base was the corner of the garden. And shortstop was this closed pin on the clothesline, halfway in between second and the clothesline pole, which was third. And you could shortstop at shortstop if you thought it was too dangerous to go for third. And that's what I was doing there. I mean, we still thought that we were the ones in charge of the rules. My brother Bob took that second strike, said, "Shoot," got mad, hit the plate, wiggled, and started in announcing. He said, "It's a great Oklahoma day, and it's a great day for baseball here on Rickenbacker Street, and Bob the Bob Henegar steps up to the plate." That's when we heard it. I mean, none of us had to say anything. It was like we were all still plugged into that radio announcer that spoke with all our voices. And the radio announcer whispered into our brains, all at once, he said, "That's too low," he said. "Sounds like a T-37 pilot, co-pilot trainee, powered by 2 Continental turbojets, cruising speed 360 miles an hour," he said. "Coming in over the right field fence." And we all looked up and over, just in time to see the canopy of that T-37 turning over in on its way down a couple of blocks over, and just in time to see that co-pilot's parachute blossom barely high enough to get down. By that time, that plane was over the house and gone. And it took us a split second to remember the face. I mean, to this day, my brother Bob and Bobby and Stan and Lyndon, they all say that when they looked up that day, they could see that pilot's face as he rode that T-37 in, rode it in over West Side Elementary, where we were not crouched in the hallway just then, and in over downtown Midwest City with the drugstore and the Five and Dime, and low over the SkyTrain Theater, and lower over that big sign on the highway said Midwest City, America's model city. Noble guy, he chased that shadow, but we just stood there, and Stan said that he had to go home right then. And Lyndon's mom started calling him, and then my mom ran out of my back door. She had my little sister in her arms, and she stood right smack in the third base path looking up, and somehow there were papers falling out of the sky. The clipboard had bounced in my neighbor's yard, but the papers settled around us, and everything stopped. That night, when my dad got home from work, he said, You know, that captain, he held that T-37 up off of us just by strength of will alone. That's all he said. Next day at school, we were kind of quiet at first because none of us were sure what to say until finally somebody said, "Did you see it?" Somebody said, "It crashed." Somebody said it was a T-37 pilot, co-pilot trainee powered by 2 Continental turbojets. Nobody said that death had passed close enough for us to see a man's face as he rode it in. I mean, so you have to understand. I mean, even our schools were the rockets and the bombers and the jets. And so the following day, after that one long, ordinary ring for recess, we spread out our arms and raced across the playground without resting. We flew on and watching for enemy fighters, armed with dirt clods, and watching for ants to bomb. And the ball fields fell away, and the air grew thin, and we put on our oxygen masks like we'd seen on TV, banked left around the backstop, and headed down the third base line on our bombing run. Those ants never saw us coming because they have terrible radar. And I said, "Roger, this is B6535, and I'm switching to radar, over." And Lyndon said, "Roger, B6535, this is Wilco 8653, and I'm switching to radar too, over." And I said, "Roger, Wilco, over and out." And he said, "Wilco, Roger, over and out." And I said, "Check, Roger, over and out." And he said, "Check to check, check." And I said, "Check." And he said, "Mayday, B6535, Mayday, engine failure, over." And I said, "So? You're a B-52. You've got 8. And he said, "No, I'm not. I'm a T-37, Mayday, engine failure, over." And I said, "That's stupid. They don't even have any bombs." And Lyndon said, "Ow!" So, it was the atomic times, but baseball was still king. So I flopped down on third base next to the wreckage of Lyndon and watched the ants start to crawl up under his collar. I knew something was going to bust loose in a split second, and I started to laugh. And, for the moment at least, death was still a vague disturbance in our lives. Like the Russians, like all those shadows through our backyards. That's right.